1, 0.
Welcome to lesson 1 of Social Media Church Basics, and we are really excited about sharing this course with you. So excited that you've taken the time to learn more about social media, and we're going to walk you through some really practical steps. We're going to assume you've never even been on Facebook or MySpace or YouTube or Twitter, and we're going to really walk you through some basics. So if you're a longtime social media user, we think you're going to learn some stuff, but if you know nothing about social media, we're going to really get practical here and really talk about the basics of social media. So let me first introduce myself. I'm Neil Smith. I'm the Innovation Pastor at Community Bible Church in San Antonio, and I live in Brooklyn, New York with my family, and I've been doing social media in ministry for about 6 or 7 years full-time, and then, in ministry since I was a youth pastor, probably for the last 13 or 14 years. I'll talk a little bit more about that. I also wrote the book, Social Media Guide for Ministry, with group publishing, and excited, that now I think we've had 6,000 pastors that have read through, or ministry leaders that have read through that book and applied those principles to their churches. So it's exciting to see how social media has grown in the church. And I'm excited for my co-host or instructor in this course, Jay Cranda. Jay, will you introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are?
Yeah, so my name is Jay Cranda. I live in Southern California in Mission Viejo. I'm the online campus pastor at Saddleback Church. Our senior pastor is Pastor Rick Warren. I've had the just amazing, fortunate, the ability to be on staff here. It's an amazing church. Grew up at a small church, a church of 600, and now a mega church. And so I've kind of seen both. Actually, Saddleback probably is a giga church now, whatever that is. And so I know both worlds, small and large. I know what it means to have a large budget and a small budget, or really no budget. And so I've been in ministry for about, full time for about 7 years, on and off, been part of the church, and we'll have a chance to share more of our story. But a big part of my world is, I thought I was going to be a youth pastor my whole life. Really, that's what I went to school with. Really started my graduate program and the attention of doing that, and got really in my kind of generation, social media blew up, and I got my on the kind of site learning is my first role in ministry here at Saddleback Church. I started our social media ministry, and that was about 6 years ago. And kind of really, to be honest, I didn't have really an active Facebook or social media presence, and really started seeing the ability and built that up. And now, Saddleback has, over what I think 100,000 likes and stuff that, other people have taken over and taken to the next level. But, my heart is, and really with this course, the basic course is really to get people off the ground and going, and really leveraging these platforms to their full potential, not just to be, hip or innovative, but to be practical, to extend the vision of your church on these platforms. And that's what we want to do over the next couple lessons, is help get you off the ground.
Yeah. So let's first talk about how you and I got off the ground, and we're going to talk a little bit about the history of social media. And the truth is, the history is as we know it. The world has been, it's a social world, that people have always interacted in different ways, and interactions have changed through history. When you begin, the printing press or different, things changed, and technologies changed the way that we interact, or email. And then social media has dramatically changed that over the last 15 years or so. My history started with social media, also with ministry as well. So I spent 12 years as a youth pastor. My first job when I was 19 years old, I say I had 2 key ministry tools that helped me to be successful. And that was a 15-passenger van. I had keys to the 15-passenger van, which was crazy that they gave a 19-year-old keys to a 15-passenger van, which has proven to be so dangerous now. But they did, and it was a great tool for me as a youth pastor. And then we also had one of those just ancient computers in the church. And it wasn't ancient then, but everybody shared one computer. We had dial-up internet. And I remember, what I would do is I'd pick up kids during the day with a 15-passenger van, and we'd go bowling, we'd go swimming, we'd do, youth stuff. And they were always talking about AIM. You were on AIM. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, AOL Instant Messenger. I'm like, oh, those like CDs everybody gets. So they showed me how to get set up on AIM. I got a handle set up.
What was your handle? Right.
It was Nils VYX.
Yeah.
Nils VYX. That was my fraternity.
I feel like everybody's handle very much dates themselves because, mine was JK Skater 14.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that was the age of the way the internet was working at that time.
That's
But
awesome. And
anyways,
did you use an 8 in the skater?
yes. Yeah, I
Yes.
did. It was JKSK8ER 14. So
That's
anyways,
awesome.
which my grandparents still, I lived with my grandparents at the time and that account still exists. I do not check it, but it
Yeah.
has 100 million spam uh, email addresses. I apologize to interrupt. I was just wanting
Yeah,
to.
no, that's good. That's a great story. So that is awesome. And you were probably 12 years old. So you were probably one of the youth when I was that youth pastor. That's funny now that I think about it. So, anyways, I had AOL Instant Messenger, but what I would do is I would hang out with kids during the day, and then I would chat with them, on AOL Instant Messenger at night, and those relationships, and they began to introduce me to their friends online. And then the next day I'd go pick their friends up in the minivan or the church van, I guess. And the digital relationships became physical relationships, face to face. And our youth group went from there were literally 2 kids at that first event this summer. By the end of the summer, we had 40 kids. We'd really, from that, on that scale, exploded. And so much of it had to do with that AOL Instant Messenger, those relationships. And that's ministry, is relationships. And so that just became a natural tool for me in the years of youth ministry. And then that tool changed because the teenagers moved from AOL Instant Messenger to MySpace, and then from MySpace to Facebook. And then parents, started getting on Facebook. And so then they've moved to different, now there's dozens of social networks that people are actively engaged on. And it's not just teenagers anymore. And I think that's where things changed about 7-8 years ago. It became a platform for just about everybody. But Jay, I want to hear your history a little bit with social media, and then more specifically social media with ministry.
Yeah. And, and what you're explaining there, and you talk about this in your book, and I talk about this briefly in my book, and the social media made easy resource that I did, that the transition from 1.0 web to 2.0 web.
Yeah.
Is that, really when web first launched, and, I'm born in 87. So I'm going to be, I'm 20, I'm 28. So it's at the time of this recording. And so it's very much, I've seen very recently where websites started very stagnant, where they were static, I meant, in that they were just pretty much PDFs in a lot of sense that you just click hyperlink around. But when they introduced when AOL introduced kind of the relational piece, there was this second layer of depth that now you're not just interacting with a PDF. Now there's a community there, you're interacting, there's some kind of communication. And obviously Instant Message was the first kind of, version of this. But for me, very much, I got introduced through AOL, instant messaging. Actually, strangely enough, I got heavily introduced because I went on a cruise when I was 13, 14, and there was a girl on the cruise that I kind of liked. Her name was Brittany, and she lived in Fresno, California. And I remember we exchanged instant messaging accounts. She was a couple years older than me, and we started instant messaging. And it was one of those, I don't know, I look back, it was kind of like one of those hopeful love stories that you think, oh, something's going to come about. Nothing did. We, though, regularly instant message back and forth. And I kind of saw the first potential of that. I experienced it myself, that there could be a connection, and, we kind of, exchange things back and forth. And I saw the potential there. Now, years kind of flash forward, I experimented very easily. I actually set up my first website was through AOL. They had a hosting providing, you could set up your own website. It was so pathetic. You know what I mean? It was like the worst thing ever. But as I got into it, I just started experimenting. And actually, one of my youth pastors at the time, actually years later, when I got into youth ministry, our junior high had a MySpace account and stuff. And I wasn't actually on MySpace or anything. And I just kind of thought kind of the worst, like, I don't need to be on these things. Nobody's on that. It's just middle school students. And I don't know, maybe if you're a pedophile, I don't know. I don't get it. I just know, at the time there wasn't a lot going on, and it was just beginning. But then I started seeing community happen where middle school students would talk to each other and leaders would talk to each other. And then my youth pastor, who's was pretty innovative, said, Jay, you need to get on Facebook. That was the new thing that was popping up.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I don't have any desire. And I'm kind of like, I'm not the guy to be innovative. Like, it's like you have that Amazon thing where it talks to you.
The Echo. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Echo. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want the Echo in my house. Like, I don't need the Echo. But I know that all these technologies, even at the time now, they develop to a point that they're going to become something important. I'm just not early. I'm like the financial, like, responsible adopter. And so Facebook, when I adopted by force, but then I saw the full community happen where I actually was interacting with people I'd never interacted with. And I saw things that could happen that were honestly better than what was happening on the patio of my church. There was community. And then the bolt started turning of, wow, now my church it's not just being on there. My church can actually extend our vision on these channels to a level that's fully potential. So when I actually was forced to, and this is what I want to challenge anybody who's just thinking about this, you need to create the accounts and just start messing around. And you have a responsibility. It's like, for me, there's all sorts of platforms that I'm not fully invested in. Snapchat is a platform that, I have an account and I forced myself to get used to it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't love the navigation of Snapchat, and we're going to talk more about that. But the idea is you got to try it out. And the motivation is that we ultimately want more people to come to know Jesus and come to live for Jesus. We want people to come and see, come and die. And there's a gradual progression, and you got to be willing to do the investment, the hard work of just messing around to see if it makes sense for a church. And ultimately, this course, we're here. We're going to help make it easier. We're going to make it an easier entry point. But, for me, it's about relationships. And ultimately, all these platforms are ways to have better relationships, better connect with people, better inform them, better disciple, and better extend your vision.
I think you really digging into it being about relationships is so key, and so when I came into my role at Community Bible Church, my title was social media pastor. So my goal and my objective and my title was about building relationships with people. And I'm a pastor. I went to seminary, and actually went to seminary online, and that's a lot of where I learned how to do, online interactions and relationships from a discipleship perspective. But it's always been important to me that it's about relationships. And we just hired at CVC a new social media manager. She only knew Facebook. She isn't a social media junkie, like a lot of people are. But she was great with the relationships, and I knew that can translate easily to online. And so when people talk about how to be great at social media, it is not about technology. It is about people that can really be intentional with relationships. And so I think that's what we want to get across in this course is how do you effectively build relationships through social media to help you really accomplish your ministry goals. And your ministry goals is to help people connect with Jesus and each other. And social media is a great tool to do that. But I think it's often we let the technology get in the way. And so we want this course to really help move the technology out of the way. We think you can really save time. It doesn't have to be a time waster. It doesn't have to be expensive. You do have to invest time in it, but you don't have to invest all of your time into it. You don't have to hire a full-time social media manager. Wherever your church might be, if you're a solo pastor by yourself, or even just a volunteer within your church, and I should never say just a volunteer because those are critical roles.
Yeah.
But if you have minimal time available to invest in social media, we're going to help you throughout this course. We're going to get very practical. But Jay, if let's talk a little bit about where does somebody start? And so even as you looked at where you started and you started tinkering around, it's different today than it was, 3, 4, 8 years ago. Where does somebody start today? What advice do you give to a church leader where they should start when it comes to social media today?
So I think one of the key essentials is to write down the vision of your church. So write down on a piece of paper, the vision, the mission statement, and ultimately some of your goals. And so I think you write that down. So whatever that is, get that down on a piece of paper, open up an Evernote tab or notes on your phone, whatever that is, write that down and start there. And what I would start with is, okay, this is the vision of our church. So, for Saddleback Church, our vision is that ultimately we want people to balance the 5 purposes in their lives. And those come from Matthew 22 in Matthew 28, the Great Commission, the Great Commandment. So we want people to balance the 5 purposes in their lives, not just on Sunday, but 24/7. We want them living a purpose-driven life. And so I would start by going, okay, God, I would talk to God. God, we want to do that the most effective way possible with the resources that exist. And I would start with some prayer. Ultimately, just go, God, and I would just pray, God, this is what our vision for our church is. And God, I pray that you can give me the strength in order to accomplish this wisely and figure out how to best do this on social media. Obviously, everything needs to be drenched with prayer. And I would start there. Write out your vision statement, your whatever that is. Write it down on a piece of paper. Write it on Evernote. Type it out. Start there, and then pray, God, we want to get this done online wisely, specifically on social media wisely. And then from there, what I would say is that I would start with Facebook. And I think this is why in our next session, we're going to talk about this, getting to know Facebook. Facebook, if you can conquer Facebook, then you can conquer all the other platforms, because essentially all you're going to be doing is adapting your strategy for all the other channels. And then from there is I would start thinking about, and these are things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a calendar. We're going to talk about a posting calendar, and we're going to help you create one of those. We're going to start talking about the way your content should flow, inspiration to go to information, and when to best do it. Start thinking about and right now, as you're going through this course, we're going to have a couple different ways you can filter this. There's going to be a basic, and then there's going to be next level. And most likely what you might need to do is that as you're going through this, you're going to start thinking about people in your church, in your community that you can empower to do this. And maybe they need to go back through this course. And then you might need to you're going to need to re-listen to some of these parts, because ultimately we're going to be providing kind of a pathway to file some of the things. And then as you start getting deeper, as you're understanding, you might need to go back through to kind of go to the next level and all this. But we're going to be covering a lot of ground. But I think getting started is you need to be thinking about your vision mission. You need to be praying that God gives you the perspective and gives you whatever you need to take away from this course, and then start getting ready for Facebook. And that means starting and creating an account and getting going, which we will cover in more detail in our next session.
I think as you look at where people are, and that's the core reason why we need to be on social media. Our church at CBC, our mission is to reach, teach, and help people in Jesus' name. You can clearly reach people with the gospel through social media. You can teach them, and grow them in discipleship, and then you can help them and minister to them, and looking for ways that you can accomplish your mission through this new mission field that exists digitally on social media, and really looking at those opportunities. I'm with you, Jay. Facebook is the place to start. There are 1 billion daily active users on Facebook. Whether you want to have a local reach or you want to have a global reach, Facebook is the core platform to do that. And if you learn Facebook, all of the other social networks will make sense. They'll be much easier to grasp. And so as you kind of develop that process of understanding and developing your understanding of Facebook, it'll be much easier to translate that knowledge base, that understanding, and that engagement opportunity to the other platforms. I've got a 3-step process that I want to encourage you to begin thinking about as you look to move on to Facebook specifically. And we're going to dig into this with Facebook, but this works with any social network as you get in. So the first thing you want to do is, this is social media, and in any conversation, you want to listen first. So listen to the conversation that's going on Facebook or whatever social network you might be engaged on. The second is interact with the conversation. So the first thing you should say is not posting a comment or not posting a comment, but posting something to the social network. You post a comment on somebody else's conversation. So you're listening to the conversation, you're engaging with the conversation. And the last thing you do is create a conversation. And you do that through your post. You do that through a video or a tweet or whatever content you might be putting out there. But don't just dive in and start talking. Dive in and start listening. Dive in and start engaging to the conversations that are happening, and then begin creating those conversations. And that's how you'll be successful on social media. And so I really want to encourage you to think about that as you move into new social networks. The next session, we're going to talk about Facebook. It's going to be a great session. We're going to dig into the nuts and bolts of Facebook. We're going to do some demoing. So you'll learn everything you need to know to really get started well when it comes to Facebook. Thanks for listening to this session and this first lesson of the Social Media Church Basics. And we're excited for what's ahead for you as you begin to do ministry on social media.
1-0